Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Happening. My name is Jorge Shaft, and I guess I'm going to tell you what's been happening this past couple of, days. It's called a week. It's like 7 days. I do it every week. It's kind of a thing, you might have noticed. But I have an exciting show planned for you today. I'm going to be talking about serious stuff, such as Biden withdrawing troops from Afghanistan after 20 years of fighting war and battles and stuff there. Going to be talking about Britain looking set to ban boiling lobsters alive and more with that. I'm going to talk about the Mitch McConnell. Basically we're going to do like a bit of an in-depth dive in this one guy and why he's been living rent-free in my head now for the past week. And finally, I'm going to round it off with, of course, the most serious, the most problem, the biggest issue, the most definite thing of all right now. Football is coming home. But before we get to that, let's go, dial it down a bit and talk about something less serious. War. War never changes. Except when it does. Which all the time. But we have a bit of a stick for you today on that, which is I've decided to take CBS News for it to sort of kind of round it out. Little full explanation from July 9th, and it's titled, Biden announces US military mission in Afghanistan will end August 31st. Right? President Biden has said the withdrawal from Afghanistan of US troops after 20 years of war will conclude on August 31st, ahead of the September 11th deadline he announced in mid-April. We are ending the nation's longest war, the president said in remarks at the White House on Thursday. At the time he announced the September deadline, about 3,500 troops remained. Earlier this week, the Pentagon said that the withdrawal was 90% complete. It proceeded quickly for a reason. What is that reason? I know there's going to be full article reading, but it is just a good sort of explanation. Fill it all round out. Our military commanders advised me that once I made the decision to end the war, we needed to move swiftly to conduct the main elements of the withdrawal. In this context, speed is safety, the president said. A different approach would have certainly come with an increased risk of safety to our personnel, and he noted that so far, no US personnel had been lost in the process. This follows as the US left last week at this place called Bagram Airport, which was the largest sort of US base in Afghanistan. The turnover of Bagram to the Afghan National Defense completed the US transfer of all 7 bases, which in effect finished the big logistical part of the withdrawal. Of course, when he said that, speed is safety, it's good to get out fast. There's a very good reason for that. The Taliban, who are the kind of Islamist militias that America's been fighting in Afghanistan, at the moment control 85% of the country. The national government army, the Afghan army, which has been so much, media attention, so much kind of look at them, they're American weapons and they've got Humvees, and here's a guy with an M4. He's it's going to be all really cool. Yeah, they're just completely collapsing like a house of cards. All of the reports have been of thousands and thousands of people fleeing to Tajikistan, which is a neighboring country to the country. There's been more reports of some of the more sort of involved and collaborative people, seeking asylum in America. It's really kind of the 21st century almost equivalent of when you look at those old footages of the Vietnam War and there was just like people like beating each other up to get on like the last helicopters to flee. At the time, it was called Saigon. Yeah, it's looking a lot like that at the moment in Afghanistan. It's not great. There was a report even of like, oh, the mood. I was like, oh, what's the mood in like the Afghan government? You know, around like President Ghani, and it was just like it's panic. They're just panicking all the time. Like they know they're going to lose. And you know what I say to that? This is going to sound really nasty, but wow, look at all these things that are not my problem. Aren't those really bad issues for President Ashraf Ghani, the Afghan president, to deal with? But not my problem. The reason why I say that, as heartless as that sounds, is because the West has been there for 20 years. Like, the soldiers who are doing the withdrawal are literally younger than the war itself. Do you not see like the insanity in that? The sheer, just irrational, pointless waste of time that is having 2 decades of continuous warfare in Afghanistan. Some of the things, in the run-up towards when Biden would announce his withdrawal, some of those like last-second like pushes by, the sort of military-industrial complex and all the sort of contractors who want to like keep the war going forever and ever and ever, so that they can always sell weapons and mercenaries. Like, some of their like discussions of it were really, really just sick. There was one article I remember in particular. I was like, oh, hey, look at like this, a story of this, soldier who's now going to go fight in Afghanistan. And he, his father actually fought in Afghanistan too. Yeah, he took part in the original invasion in 2001. Isn't that romantic? Yay! And you're like, what? And it's like, yeah, this soldier, he's like 3 when the war, when the war started. And now look at him. Look how much he's grown up now. And you're like, what? What? That's insane. What? Why are we celebrating this? And the answer, turns out that my attitude was actually very in line with like the majority of people's attitude. It's something like 18% of Americans still support being in Afghanistan. And it's like, yeah, that's not surprising. It's even less when you look at like some of the allies. Like for Britain, we actually sort of withdrew our sort of soldiers a little while ago from the country. But like when Britain did, it was like 10%. Like nobody in Britain wanted to have like troops in the country. And it's like, yeah, been forever. There's been no progress. And like the people in the country hate the sort of, I'll be blunt, puppet government that like the West put in place. Nobody sees it as legitimate there because, of course, it's a government propped up by literal foreign troops. Like, I sometimes like think of it as like, flip the script. Now imagine if like 20 years ago, I don't know, China had invaded Britain and installed like, their own guy to be the sort of the leader of Britain. Like, oh, he's the prime minister now. Like 20 years later, and it's like the Chinese troops would still be there. But it's like, oh, but yeah, but you had an election. Like, it's obvious, isn't it? You'd still think, yeah, but that's still like a foreign puppet. Like, screw that. I don't want to like, be living under like some foreign country telling me what to do. I want to like make my own country, have my own laws and all that stuff. And so it's like, yeah, of course, the moment Western soldiers leave, like, of course, at that precise second, the militants are just going to take over. Not that I like them. I will have it on record that violent sort of jihadist sort of ideology, not in favor. No, surprise. I know. I actually don't like jihadism. I don't like terrorism and all this sort of stuff. But there's got to be a point when you go like, yeah, but that country wants it. So, and like we've been there for decades, and they still want it. You just kind of go, all right, be that way then. Like it's not an annexation. It's not a permanent occupation. Not that even that was in any way, a legitimate reason to still be there. If you want to talk terror, if you want to talk about like, horrendous evil people, then why not talk about some of America and Britain's own allies in that region? Famously there was a big report that came out that was like, yeah, child slaves. It's like, oh yeah, those are really the people we really, really, associate with and really want to be running the country. The warlords with the child slaves. Yeah, go. I don't know. Go the warlords. They probably just switched sides at this point. Like there's been lots of reports of like commanders in Afghanistan like just making deals with the Taliban or just outright switching sides to the Taliban. And you're like, where's the surprise? It's like, shock, horror. The warlord with the child slaves is okay switching sides to join the Islamist militias as soon as the American army leaves. Wow, who could have seen that coming? Oh, it's so bad. Like, the only kind of response you can have is just to smile, because otherwise the dread is just going to sink in. But it's not the worst kind of dread. It is. It really is kind of a, inevitability, if you will. Like, I keep repeating this point, but it really is that important to me. It's just, the armies were there for 20 years. It was the longest war in American history. By quite a long way, too. I think the previous longest war was like 14 years. It's like, so 6 extra years. Like 6 years is more than most wars are, just in general. But then that plus 14 more years, like, it's insanity. And maybe you could say at the beginning that, oh, it was like a good cause because, Bin Laden was a bad guy and he blew up the Twin Towers. Okay, sure. Bin Laden died in 2009 and he wasn't even in Afghanistan. He's in Pakistan. You could then argue, oh, but like Al-Qaeda were bad people and they're in Afghanistan. There's less than 500, there's like 5 Al-Qaeda operatives in Afghanistan. Like, that's such a non-factor now in the country that, like, I can't even just describe it. Like, even the Taliban say they don't like Al-Qaeda and say they go and fight them. Like, they're so irrelevant. And they were already like that in, like, 2015. You could even argue, oh, but, like, it was really important to go and, like, take over, to, like, make a stand against 9/11 and to really show that, like, America won't be cowed and won't be, intimidated. Okay. Sure. And I'll grant you, a lot of those Al-Qaeda operatives were, in fact, trained up in Taliban Afghanistan at that time. Yeah. Fair enough. But of the 11 attackers, what was it? 8 of them were Saudi. Bin Laden was a Saudi. All the money funding Al-Qaeda was from Saudi Arabia. Oh, but they're our allies. We happily sell them weapons as they use it to genocide children in Yemen. So we can't invade them. No, no, no. They did all of they were the money, the personnel, the organization, but some of the logistics came from Afghanistan. So it was really important to go and attack them instead. Oh, and by the way, coincidentally, Afghanistan also had no money. It was like really poor. Had been fighting the Soviets and the Russians forever. Been fighting each other then ever since. And oh yeah, also has like huge mineral wealth. Oops, did I say the quiet part out loud? That's inconvenient. Yeah, and you know what I should do? I should just, flip on over to another subject, just to not, let that bit percolate into anything, seditious, into anything unwanted. Yeah, that sounds good, doesn't it? That sounds very, very good. So let's talk about lobsters. So I've got an article up by the Metro, which was from Wednesday, and you see, here's a little bit of context to this story from my personal point of view. I first heard of it on the radio. I know, right? The radio man listens to radio. Next thing you'll tell me, water is wet. But on the radio, they were talking about this. Oh yeah, there's let's go for banning boiling the lobsters. And I had precisely three thoughts. Simultaneously, I had three thoughts because I am that kind of guy. First thought was, wait, that's still not banned? What? Like, even the Nazis figured that out. Way back in the 1930s. Realized that, hey, boiling lobsters alive, boiling things alive, turns out, really incredibly cruel way of killing something. Second point was, hey, all of the callers, on the radio who call in to say their thing, all of them agreed. Like every single call, and every single one, like every message the radio man was talking about, they were like, yeah, of course it should be banned. Yeah, of course it should be banned. Yeah, of course it should be banned. Of course it should be banned. There's even like one guy who was like, yeah, they taste better when they're like killed humanely, and they're more tender and nice. Why? There's like another who was like, oh yeah, I had like a lobster as a pet, and like lobsters are actually really adorable. Like, why are we boiling them alive? And you're like, yeah, no way, right? So then the last thought, third thought was like, man, this provision should be added as quickly as possible. So according to the article from Metro that I have, it's actually not quite yet. Boiling lobsters alive to be banned under proposed government plans. All right? Boiling lobsters while alive could be made illegal under new proposed animal welfare laws for crustaceans and mollusks. The government would recognise that lobsters, crabs, octopuses, squids, and other invertebrates can feel pain and are sentient beings. Parliament is currently reviewing the Animal Welfare Sentience Bill, which currently only contains laws relating to vertebrates or animals with backbones. But campaigners and pressure groups have pushed ministers to back an amendment extending the laws to shellfish and cephalopod mollusks. The practice of killing lobsters while alive is already illegal in Switzerland, Norway, and New Zealand, which is a depressingly small list, isn't it? Like, there's so many aspects to this story and I suppose the first one is just like the fact that they talk about like, oh yeah, the noise when you put like a lobster into a boiling water. But that's just the air coming out. And that always strikes me as a kind of like a, is it? I mean, I don't know. It's like, do lobsters scream? Is that a thing? Like, I don't know. Like, some of that noise could really be lobsters screaming. I'm not an expert. I'm not like a marine biologist on this one, but like, is is it really just air leaving? Like, it's like, are you sure about that, son? The it's the fact that so few countries ban this practice. It's also really kind of sad. It's like, really, just 3 countries. It's like, why? Seriously, why? Like, what is like the perceived benefit? Like, does it taste nicer? Okay, tastes nicer by inflicting like extreme cruelty on what you're trying to eat, and it like okay, and like there's another argument that was like, oh, it like makes the sort of like lobster, it's got like the lobster's got like all kinds of like stuff in it, and you want to like boil it away so it's like safe to eat or whatever. Like, okay, does it have to be alive for that? Like, surely you could like, block it out and then boil it. Will that make a huge difference? According to various chefs, like like cooking sites that I've seen, the answer seems to be there's not really any difference at all. I mean, heck, like there was even just like one of the like little kind of callers on the radio show who was just like, yeah, you just like bash with like a knife, like right in the head. It's like kills it instantly. Which is like, yeah, of course, it's like brain's now obliterated. And then it's like, yeah, still then really good to eat. But then it was also like the only other argument I can think of for like keeping the practice in favor is like, oh, the like it looks more presentable. Like, instead of like having the whole creature be like, of a mangled head or something, it's just like, all the beautiful, immaculate, bright red lobster ready to eat if you're like can afford it. And it was just like, okay, but you've still inflicted like a really cruel thing, like in that lobster's like final moments. And like, I don't know, like they kind of seem to be alive. They kind of seem to have some kind of brain that seems to perceive the world in like lobster ways. Is like, why would you be like so in favor of taking it out in a what seems to be like a horrific way? Like I struggle to think of like what is like a more horrific way of taking something out than like boiling them alive. Like, Jesus Christ. Especially for something that breathes the water. It's like they're gonna be breathing that stuff and boiling it. What? Like, I just cringe. This is a genuine call, by the way. If you like have an argument for like why it's not a good fit to have this ban, or make the ban be added to the amendment. If you've got like an idea of like, oh, it actually does like make some like big difference. I don't know. I'm not eating lobsters all the time. In fact, so like I'm not like a huge expert, but it seems to be like there's no real reason that I can tell to keep the practice going. So if you've got something like, I'd love to hear from you. On Relaks Radio on the Facebook live stream, which I'm doing at the moment. I always make a point of reading the comments and, having a chat. This is very much a sort of a real call. Like, I just don't see any, counter arguments, and it's just nothing but inertia, really, that seems to be keeping it going. But I think I'll let you have a bit of time to write those responses and write those comments so I can learn something today. But first, I think I'm going to let the other people have a little bit of a chat. I hear they have something really smart to say, really cool. So I really recommend listening to them. The other people know what they're doing. But in the meantime, I will catch you all again very, very soon.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're writing? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, mainly one because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
The valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday. And what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I saving or investing for? Why am I doing it? When will I need the money? And how much money do I need? Yeah. So that's quite important, because when you're looking at your net worth, you got to start with saying, well, what do I want my net worth to be, so that there's a goal, and then work backwards. How do I get there? And if I can start with £50 or $50 a week, if I save that every week, and you can go online and use calculators online. I don't have to teach you the maths behind it, but you can say, okay, and if I get a 3% return and I put this away for how long will it take to reach my goal? And that's called just this basic cash flow projection calculations. And it's what we use in financial planning all the time. What we say to clients is we say, okay, what is your goal? What is your objective? Where do you want to go to? And we discuss that in a lot of detail and over most of the meeting. And then the rest of it is saying, okay, in your exact circumstances, with your risk profile, with how you feel about investments and pensions and taxes and where you are and who you work with, and your education level or your lack of education or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account, and then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time. And we say, okay, we need to increase it, we're on track, we're not, this is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million, and they're different. Right? They range differently from everyone, but and from country to country, to be fair. Different countries have different tax laws, so different vehicles. But from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies, and then you step up into different things.
Hello and welcome back to The Happening. And about what enjoyed the other people, I will now make a big point to be as tax efficient as possible. But then saying that as a guy who has like Luxembourg citizenship, that's maybe very suspicious. So I think I'll avoid doing that and just talk about the things that have been happening this past week. There's been a couple of stories this past week involving the US Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Mostly to do with things of the usual sort of things of like dodging questions. He said that calls to defund the police were utter nonsense. He got into a bit of a spat with Donald Trump again. But who is this man? Why have I decided to make like a whole point about like this one guy? I've got Wikipedia up for this because it's the basic facts about a man. Like what's the like claims here? And it says this: Addison Mitchell McConnell III. Oh, there's something aggressively like aristocratic in that. But anyway, he's an American politician, a member of the Republican Party. He has served as the senior United States Senator from Kentucky since 1985, and as Senate Minority Leader since 2021. He previously served as Senate Majority Leader from 2015 to 2021, and as Minority Leader from 2007 to 2015. He is married to former Secretary of Transportation and Secretary of Labor, Elaine Chao. Okay, so far we have something fairly, sounds fairly sort of standard about that. He's just like a politician. He's been like Senate Majority and Minority Leader. Okay, that's like an achievement. But like apart from that, it just seems, whatever. McConnell holds conservative political positions, although he was known as a pragmatist and moderate early in his career. He led opposition to stricter campaign finance laws, culminating the Supreme Court ruling Citizens United versus FEC that partially overturned bipartisan Campaign Finance Reform Act. McConnell worked to hold with Republican support for major presidential initiatives during the Obama administration, made frequent use of the filibuster, blocked many of that president's judicial appointees, including Supreme nominee Merrick Garland. During the Trump administration, he under his leadership, confirmed a record number of federal appeals judges and won confirmation battles on Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett for the US Supreme Court. While supportive of many of Trump's policies, McConnell has been critical of the president's attempt to overturn the 2020 United States presidential election, and despite sort of deeming him practically and morally responsible for the 2021 United States Capitol attack, he voted to acquit Trump at the second impeachment trial on reasons related to the constitutionality of impeaching a former president. I think a lot of that speaks for itself. What you're seeing, let me sort of break down and tell you a little bit of a story about this guy. This guy apparently is really into game theory, which is not just a sort of comedic YouTube channel, but it's also like a theory about how to, operate, how to move and shape things. The basic premise of game theory is kind of hard to explain, but it's basically the idea of, if you want, this goal, then you're going to act in this way. Therefore, I'm going to try and do this to manipulate what you're going to do in these circumstances. It's basically the really simple, overly simplified way of putting it. As I said, I'm not hugely read up on what it is, but that's the basic premise of it. McConnell is reading it all the time. He's every single thing. He's every single senator in the whole of the thing. Every single congressman, just all of their things written out. It's okay, if we do this, then he's going to do that. But if we do this other thing, then he's going to do the thing which we actually want. And when we do the thing he wants, then we're going to do that. And planning away, Byzantine kind of thing to the end of time. He's been very effective, as that little Wikipedia paragraph laid down. I bring him up, and I think it's important to talk about why he's been living in my head for so long. To get straight to the point is, in some ways, much as it's really not nice to say, been one of the most effective politicians, one of the most influential politicians, possibly in US history. Point blank. That much. He's a guy who has known what he wants and gotten it, and been very, very effective at organizing things to be that way. Which, in normal circumstances, and for most people, I'd actually just say that's a good thing. Of course, if you're going into politics, you probably believe in something, and if you believe in that something, and then achieve it, chances are you probably found some way to make some group you care about, their lives better. But now we have to discuss his goals. This guy is a very, very sort of ultra-conservative, sort of Christian. And he realized, way back even in the 80s, that at some point, his kind of philosophy, his kind of super conservative Christian kind of bloc is going to lose the demographics. He saw that at some point, Christians might not even be the majority of the country anymore. He decided he wasn't okay with that. Now, a normal person might think to kind of do something about it by arguing, by like going, okay, if people aren't like in favor of like my religion, and like the laws that are like derived from that religion, then surely like convince people to my side, have the argument of like, no, but like my religion is like the right one, and you can see it does like all these good things, and argue that like all these, like it's really good for your life if you like believe in my thing, and that's why you should too. He didn't. He went for the approach of, what I'm going to do is kind of rig up the kind of government mechanics, the government kind of levers of power, so that it will always be my group in charge. And when there's always my group in charge, then who cares about what the country itself does? Because all of the levers of power, all of the mechanisms, will all be controlled by the sort of ultra-conservative Christian group, the Republicans, and it'll be happy days for the rest of time, at least till I die of old age. That's something that makes me think of a little expression, a little half threat, half just statement of fact. Forgot who said it, but those who make evolution impossible make revolution inevitable. America, in a lot of ways, the United States, has started to really frighten me. And one of the things that frightens me the most has been its utter inability now to actually evolve, to actually change with the times. There's 1,000 different places I could talk about. I could talk about healthcare, where the last change that we saw on healthcare, of any kind of significance was, you could argue maybe Obama in 2009, over 11 years ago, saying, with like and even that was just like the mildest, smallest little step towards, a better healthcare system. A lot of it all watered down by the courts at this point. There's been like minor repeals here and there, leading to a horrific situation where medical bankruptcy is like the second most common reason for bankruptcy, if not the first. Hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people going into medical bankruptcy every year, humongous bills, giant administrative overheads, stifling innovations, even at this point. Oh yeah, by the way, should I mention, doesn't even have a universal healthcare system, like the most basic thing in the world. And like 70% of the country is in favor of universal healthcare. But the state is unresponsive. And it is unresponsive because Mitch McConnell has designed it to be that way. I could talk about a whole lot of other things. The Afghanistan war. It's had basically zero support for 10 years. And yet only now is there a withdrawal. Almost a full decade after the people had actually wanted to leave. I could talk about just everything. Taxes despised, infrastructure crumbling, and yet the Democrats are unable to make a basic infrastructure repair bill. The District of Columbia, which is the capital, and Puerto Rico, still not states, despite overwhelming support in those territories to be states. It just goes on and on and on. And that's okay, except it's not. More and more crises are springing up across the board. A lot of them climate change, but a lot of them just general resource extractions. a lot of the world is starting to kind of really fixate on water and create like water empires, control the sources of water. And America's really actually starting to go down a bad road when it comes to water. The Colorado River, which is basically like this one big giant river in the southwest of the US, in the desert, is already running low. And there's talks about it like not basically drying up before it even hits the sea. There's just like so much use, so many different cities and farms and places taking like that one water resource. And yet Congress doesn't build desalination plants at the coastline because they're too busy arguing and too busy being paralyzed by an ultra-conservative court that doesn't favor it. The healthcare system, atrocious abomination. And yet, even the mildest, most basic kind of reforms seem utterly impossible. Last year, there were mass protests across the world for Black Lives Matter. A psychotic police officer, frankly, killed a man, with 3 others. And, thank goodness, as I reported on Relaks Radio at The Happening, which you can check out on the Facebook page, he has gone to prison now. But has anything actually changed? One cop went to prison because he got caught on camera when he killed George Floyd. Okay. Just yesterday, there was another police shooting. Young woman in Georgia, I think it was, shot dead by cops by all sort of my first viewings, no good reason. Is there going to be a protest about it? Maybe, maybe not. Is there going to be any change coming from that? Seems unlikely. Because at this point, really is starting to look like a when an actual revolution happens, and the nightmares become real. There's going to be people culpable for that. There'll be people who are the reason why the state stopped being completely unresponsive to the needs of the people and stopped being representative of them. There'll be many names to list off. There'll be many people to talk about as they're like part of the problem. But I hope that people will, because I think it will be in some decade, some time. Won't happen immediately. But I hope people will remember that there was a Kentucky senator in the 2010s and noughties and 20s called Mitch McConnell, who made it his life work to rig the state completely against being able to have any kind of natural evolution. And had a big fat smile the whole time. What do you think? Do you think I'm scaremongering? Do you think I'm just fretting, being anxious about things that aren't real? If you think so, let me know. Always make sure to look at the Facebook live streams. But in the meantime, I have one last deadly serious issue. I'm even going to adjust my glasses and sit down straight. Look, sorry to say this, but football's coming home. You see, here's the context. Normally I don't care about football. I just don't. I'm kind of oh, football happened. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's like that scene from the IT Crowd, if you ever watched it, where I'm like, oh, and now that guy's kicking the ball. Oh, I bet. Oh, the crowd like that. Oh, and now this guy's kicking the ball. Oh, that's really going to change the game of the play. I quite enjoy playing football. I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy playing it. But apart from that, I'm okay. There's just people playing games, apparently. But this time it's become a bit different because England is now in the final for the Euros, the Euro World Cup. Or is it European Cup? Just the Euros. England hasn't been in a final for a contest in decades. England hasn't won a contest of some football contest, from what I can tell, since 1955. That's a long, long time. And every time England does any kind of like performance, like it's forever and to the end of tomorrow, all the old grainy footage of like, oh yes, and here we have, what's his name, like Bobby something, doing the kicking the ball, and yes, what a splendid goal! England has won, the World Cup. Yes, very good. They legit have these kind of accents, and well, it looks very likely that England might carry it home. Just one more game happening. Will be against Italy. I'd say go and watch it, but I'll be honest, chances are you probably are. There's just the excitement in Britain seems very palpable. Like even I've gotten to the point where like I notice, oh hey, like people are like watching football and they're like cheering and there's like flags on the street. Like there's a flag in the building like over there, like from like my place. It's like there's never flags on homes in England. Like it's something I've legitimately noticed that like England doesn't really fly flags, like British or England flags, very much, unless you're like kind of suspect. It's kind of weird. Like no other country seems to have that, but there's now flags. Who knows? Maybe it might happen. And I mean, I'd be happy. Been about time that Britain's had just like an unambiguous, just like a good thing happen that didn't immediately turn sour in some way. And yeah, I'd keep going, but it would just be repeating the same point. I really hope England wins tonight. The politics around Britain's wins so far have been mired in scandal and controversy. But I mean, maybe it would have to be. England at the moment is a very divided country. It's one that you have Leavers and Remainers being two camps with seemingly irreconcilable differences. And maybe they could be bridged in some way and lead Britain to a very positive direction. I'll tell you what will really help out with that. Britain wins. And so, let's take it home. And I'll see you all again very, very soon. See you next week. And I'll see if I'm either crying about the result or cheering about it. In the meantime, have a good day.